They're not
James is still talking about Kazahk.
Kazahk.
Okay.
Kazahk. The funny K sound that they've got in the real language. It's weirdly they spell it with a K and a KH, but it's the same sound. It's kind of like a K said deeply in the throat. Anyway, I'll just mention some of the. I was mentioning about it. Here is the book. That the glossary wasn't sufficient, but they usually aren't in something this long. The thing to do is to make sure that you don't have any word in the examples and in the exercises and stuff like that, the dialogues and so on and so forth, that you don't have in your glossary. Save people the effort of, and the expense really, of having a separate dictionary. That's not what it should be about with a course for beginners. Eventually you'll want people to get a dictionary and stuff like that. This should basically be about grammar and then certain limited vocabulary. They did have, like a lot of things that are more, a popularization, they actually had the pronunciation IPA. Their explanation of the pronunciation for people who don't know the IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, is not exactly satisfactory. What else was I going to say? They did have a lot of exercises in here and a lot of dialogue, so a lot of examples to work one's way through the grammar, and I think that's important. So someone did some work there, different types of exercises. They weren't all the same. Some of them are, like answer a question, fill in the blanks, a little bit of matching, the usual sort of stuff. They have some cultural points. It's maybe important to understand a little bit of the place that you might be visiting. I think this is to a large extent for people who intend to be tourists. I don't know if the connections with Kazakhstan are that good. It'd be better, I suppose, than they were during the Cold War. This book's about 10 years old, 8 years old, or something. What else was I going to say about? I was going to say, don't waste fresh money on it. Get it used if you can. They had a pretty good, kind of a synopsis, a grammar summary of the grammar in about a little over 10 pages, a dozen pages or so. They do have answers to the exercises, at least the ones where the answers are pretty well pro forma and stuff like that. I like that in a grammar that isn't, if it's for a class, you can't really have that. The grammar, the glossary is fairly extensive, about 1,500 words. If you memorize those 1,500 words, that's the Kazakh English glossary, the English Kazakh glossary, it's a little bit shorter. You'd be well on your way to being able to read a newspaper. I think they figure that you need about maybe 2,000 words to read a newspaper with some degree of, probably more some than or a degree than a huge degree, but some degree of confidence. That's actually not that much of an achievement. So what I did here is I spent basically something like 8-hour days for 5 days in a row, and then maybe half of another day. So I figure it takes about 90 hours of work to do the equivalent of a semester course at a university. That would be a 12-week course, and So I got in something on there. I think it'd probably be a little bit more than 45 hours, which would be half of the course or something like that. Someone could put a little bit more work in there. I wasn't really that much stressed about. I didn't do the writing exercises and things like that. I'm not interested in that sort of thing. I'm interested enough, I should say. I'd love to be able to write any number of languages other than English. I have a hard enough time writing English. And I just worry, like there's so many languages. We're told 6,000, 7,000 still existing in the world today, that all I can really be concerned about, particularly at my age, I haven't just turned 67, it's been a few months, I just worry about being able to read the languages. In some cases, just like Akkadian cuneiform, that's Assyrian and Babylonian. I'm just happy to be able to, understand the writing system a little bit, kind of be able to study the language or translate it slowly, It'd be that way with the biblical Hebrew, Greek stuff, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's important to understand how these are put together, particularly with cuneiform script. I'm working on the cuneiform script, also Hittite cuneiform and the Hittite hieroglyphs and things like that, because there have been names that have been missed, like connections, personal place names that it's stunning. You find Akkad, it's there. It's been dug out of the earth, and they don't even realize it. It's partly because the chronology is wrong, coming from the Egyptian side of things. It's messed up the Mesopotamian chronology. Something fierce, really. And you'll find names of Hittite rulers in the Assyrian annals. You'll find the names of Egyptian kings, of pharaohs in the Assyrian annals, and no one's picked them up. You'll find all sorts of things. So, I've picked up enough of the cuneiform to figure things out. I've been able to figure out where Washagani is. They're going, it's a capital of the Hurrian state. Went down somewhere around 1350 BC. The date's, of course, wrong. But it's more like 850 BC. And, yeah, it's there. The Assyrians record it. They record taking it down several times and setting up an administrative center there. Unfortunately, it's underwater. It was put under a dam was built downriver of it. It's on the Tigris River. It's not, it's not in the Kashiari Hills. It's at the foot of the Kashiari Mountains, or whatever you want to call it. The Assyrians actually described it as being at the foot of the Kashiari Mountains. The Assyrians, it would be ridiculous to expect the Assyrians to spell it exactly the same way as the Hittites did, or as exactly the same way as the Hurrians did. I don't think it was naturally Hurrian territory. In the same way that Alexander the Great set up his capital not in Macedon, it was in Babylon eventually. And, like the Romans eventually, they had at least one of their capitals up in the borderlands of Germany. Like the Hittites themselves, they had two capitals, one down south, Datasha, and it's easy to figure out what it is. Maybe some people have figured it out, but the northern capital, Hattusas, it was there so they could keep the gas out, and the gas are just, come on, they're the Scythians, they're Scythians, come on, there's nothing that says the Hittites should have spelled it properly. Of course, there's a 500-year discrepancy, but there's a 500-year discrepancy in raw radiocarbon readings and the calibrated readings. They're not readings, they're just there. They're ad hoc additions to the raw readings put there to please the Egyptologists. I don't believe in pleasing the Egyptologists. They do enough pleasing, shall we even say pleasuring themselves. They should be plenty, shall we say, satisfied with their own self-attention. So, yeah. Anyway, that's about that. Again, don't spend any hard-earned cash, not much hard-earned cash, on this sort of stuff. It's worth going through. However, if you can get it out of the library, or if you can get it used or something like that, it's worth going through. I don't know if there are too many other things that are as detailed for Kazakh. It's kind of a weird and wild and wonderful language. You'll be hearing more about some other stuff. Working a little bit on Malay, a little bit on Indonesian, a little bit on Swahili, a little bit on Hausa, a little bit on Geg and Tosk, two languages in Albania. Tend to call them Albanian. Working a little bit on Old Iranian, a little bit on Farsi, Old Persian. Working a little bit on. I've already done some work on Turkish, and I finished a grammar atlas last summer. Done quite a bit of work on Arabic, one way or another. A little bit of work on Bosnian, and a little bit of work on Bengali, a little bit of work on Punjabi, Western as well as Eastern, a little bit of work on Sindhi, a little bit of, I want to do some work on Baluchi, a little bit of work on Pakhto and Pashto, two dialects of the Pashtuns, Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. So
you're sounding like a Bob Dylan song.
Just enumeration, his bad songs. Yeah, you know when Bob Dylan doesn't have much inspiration. Perhaps I don't have much inspiration. He just starts enumerating things. Those are some of his worst songs. So, what did you do, my blue-eyed son? My darling young one. I like that part. And then he starts, that's actually one of his better enumeration poems or songs, lyrics. So was there anything that you wanted to chat about? So it's a fairly good transition, Afghanistan. So they actually had I was talking about Pashtun and stuff like that. So I actually had a recently good program this morning, late this morning on CBC. They were interviewing someone who actually knew a little bit about Pakistan. He's a journalist, so we'll try not to hold that against him. And there are way worse things in this world, particularly people who go out and intimidate and kill journalists and so on and so forth. They serve a purpose. Sometimes I wonder if they serve it that well. But this guy seemed to know a little bit about Pakistan. So finally the question it should have been question number one, like, who's behind all this? Well, they were saying, who are the Taliban's friends? It's not friends. Who's running them? And this guy actually didn't put the interviewer straight. Who's running them is, he said they're best friends, kind of like the Pakistanis. No. The Pakistanis are running the Taliban as a sort of Pakistani Foreign Legion. They don't have designs just on Afghanistan. They have designs on former Soviet Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and so on and so forth. They've got designs. We don't live. Are you ready for this bad news, you Fogoshes? We do not live in a post-colonial era. We don't live in a neo-imperialist empire that's where it's late capitalism and stuff like that. We live in a paleo-imperialistic time. The Chinese empire is expanding beyond its traditional limits. It is Pakistan is, yeah, like it's got its paws out, and it's got its cat's paws in the Taliban and stuff like that. And I'm sure there are a lot of people saying, "Oh, wow, United States been beaten again. This is awesome. The world's just, it's just this far away from the millennium. Wow, we're so close to paradise." So he did mention Pakistan. And then he said, there's a big country there who's they're really interested in the lithium. That's for batteries. Apparently they've tied up. It's a contract maybe with Brazil. Like a long-term contract for lithium. It's important, right? You see what I'm saying? And I think it's Brazil. So it's the Chinese. He mentioned the Russians have also benefited from this, but it's basically the Chinese. The Chinese People's Republic of China, for people who want to accuse me of racism and stuff like that. I support people from Taiwan. I support people from Hong Kong. I support people who are dissidents in the People's Republic of China. I support them almost to the hilt. Of course, the hilt is basically, like it's not as though they're getting they're stabbing people. They're getting stabbed. But yeah, so get that straight. I do not support any stretch of the imagination attacks on Chinese people over here. They tend to be people who'd be refugees from that kind of system. So get that straight. Oh yeah, and we were talking, was it about Turkey yesterday? Turkey and ISIS? Yeah, yesterday and the day before I was running through the office.
Okay.
They mentioned the big supporters, Russia, China, for the Taliban. Russia, the Chinese, Pakistan, and Turkey.
He did, eh?
He mentioned Turkey, running these god-awful sphincters, the Taliban. Now, they're not as bad as ISIS, by all accounts, most, but they're brutal, they're awful. To call them medieval is wrong. Fundamentalist Islam harks back to fundamentalist, what you could call fundamentalist Judaism. When did Judaical law, when did it come down the pike? Now it's misdated ultimately by the Egyptologists. They say, oh, it's the end of the late Bronze Age. That's early enough. It was actually the end of the old Bronze Age, which is, not as far back as it's dated, but would be around 1850 BC. That's almost 4,000 years ago. But even if the 1200 BC date is accepted for the Exodus and for Moses and for the laying down of the Jewish law, or what became Jewish law, that's 3,000 years ago. And when you look, we call it the Judeo-Christian tradition that Islam is supposed to have come out of, and I'm going, no. Yeah, Isa is considered a prophet. That's Jesus in Arabic, and stuff like that. And you've got, some of the apostles might get referred to. But it tends to be the names that are taken from the Bible tend to be Old Testament names. I think Eunice is Jonah. It seems as though it's a Greek pronunciation. Abraham, Jacob, Jacob. I'm mispronouncing them in Arabic. Isaac is Isaac, just on and on. Yusuf, Joseph, so on and so forth. The important thing is, where there's a divide between Judaism and Christianity, Islam almost invariably plumps for the Judaic interpretation. Halal is like kosher. There's circumcision. There's multiple wives. You'll find that in the Old Testament. I don't know if you'll see much of that in the New Testament.
Wow, we lost quite a few apples that
Yep. So one of these days I'm going to give you a list of where the divide. The one difference is the proselytizing, but the proselytizing is different. It's not a big thing in Judaism. Missionary work is big with Christians. It was way back when, and it still is. The Muslims actually tend to pride themselves on not indulging in missionary activity. So, like, oh, but they didn't conquer by the sword. Okay, yeah, like people are just we're rushing to them for hundreds of years. Hey, I want to convert. Doesn't work out that way in real history, okay? It doesn't work out that way. Anyway, it is not medieval. It is, we won't say it's old bronze, we're going to say it's middle bronze. At the latest, it's early Iron Age, if you accept the mistaken chronology of the Egyptologists. And that is, for Pete's sake, it's like it's like 3,000 years ago. It's old-fashioned. Get that straight. It's not medieval. You'll hear people say, oh, it's medieval. No. Like Marx kind of had this different designation of things. Capitalist society, medieval society, serf holding, and then he's got the slave society. It's a slave society. Jesus. Anyway, so we're talking about Pakistan and Afghanistan. Are we almost out of battery juice?
You have about 7 minutes or something?
All right. So I want to remind you stupid Fogoshes who are going around saying, well, the United States should negotiate with the Taliban. There ain't no negotiating with them. It's their way or the highway. And what highway is that? It's the highway to hell. Get that straight. There's no negotiating. They're making noises about including women and being inclusive with this. Yep, might well be making noises about including gays in their political system. It's like Mao. Let 100 flowers bloom. Let 100 schools contend. And the basic thing is let the flowers grow and then you'll chop them off. They want people to come out of the woodwork, as it were, and then they'll know who to whack. So there's no negotiating with these guys. You negotiate with them the way they negotiate with you, which is, I hate to say it, but it's just the way it is. Out and out violence. Hopefully you don't have to resort to the terrorism that they resort to as a matter of default. It's their default setting. Terrorism. Maybe that's enough said for now. But yeah, now I do want to talk about the United States and announcing their deadline. You see, like they're saying, okay, we're getting out at the just before 9/11, the 20-year anniversary. You notice how the Taliban had to make sure that they kind of forced the United States, or looked as though they forced the United States out right away, before the end of the deadline. They took over. And, so they're strutting around, we beat the United States. No, the United States got just sick and tired of you. Like the United States kicked your hindquarters. And it wasn't even that. All they did was they bribed a bunch of people in Kunduz and Mazar-e Sharif, bribe. And now this is what the Taliban did. The United States had their little government that they wanted to support and stuff like that, and all the Pakistanis did was they came in and gave the Taliban more money, and they came in. That's why Afghanistan fell so fast. There wasn't a lot of fighting, it was just money getting spread around. Now, that having been said, the interviewer was saying, so the Pakistanis will be calling the shots. No, they don't have enough money. I want no aid sent to Pakistan as long as they're running the Taliban. None from Canada. None should be sent from anywhere in the world that believes in democracy or rights for women or rights for gays, etc., etc., etc. I want none sent to Pakistan. And hey, you know, the people in Afghanistan didn't fight. If they'd really wanted, the majority of people are not Pashtun. The Taliban is basically a Pashtun movement. If they'd really wanted to fend these guys off, they could have at least tried, and frankly, they would have. But they didn't. They got bought off. So why should, you know, this guy was saying we should be sending aid. What? All we're doing is enabling them. Sending aid to Afghanistan? What are you talking about? That would just go into the pockets of the Taliban. Or they'd be getting it. Here's our largesse here. What do you guys think of our government now? It's insane. It's absolutely insane to do that sort of stuff. All you're doing is enabling them to stay in power longer. And it's not just in power. It's like the way they exercise that power. It's absolutely unconscionable. Crazy, crazy stuff. Anyway, enough said, I suppose. For now, you'll be hearing it again. Tune in. Be ready for weeping and gnashing of teeth on your part.